Welcome to Vistamar School. My name's Rob Lovelace, and I'm chairman of the board. And I understand there's been some confusion, so I'd like to start by clearing up one thing. Despite all the time that I spend here at the school, I'm not actually an employee. I actually was confused the other day for someone that's known me for several years thinking that I worked here, which I'm proud of. But it is an honor to be able to invite you all to the forum tonight. I know we've got a lot of people who it's the first time they've been to Vistamar, and you'll be learning about the school, and we're excited to have you all here, so thank you. You may have noticed outside some boards. A lot of that was to show you that we have very competitive sports here at Vistamar. Because we don't have the actual athletic facilities here at the school, we've learned to show pictures of them so that you can see that we play on very nice fields and in nice gymnasiums, so that's one of the elements. The other one that was a little more hidden on the way in was the mock-up of construction for a new performing arts space. So again, for those who don't know the school so well, we're a school on the move. And while this is an interesting architectural design in the room, it's actually been done this way because we knew we were going to be building. And so this summer, we're very excited that we will be converting this space into a more formal performing arts space, the next phase of construction and success for the school. If you want to see what it's going to look like, again, there's a board outside. Please take a look. If you want to learn more about it, please talk to me or Jim Buckheit or anyone in the school. We'd love to tell you more about it, especially if you want to get involved. I'd also like to welcome you to the Vistamar Forum this evening. This is a tradition. We're not a new school anymore, but we are still evolving our traditions. And having this community forum is one of them. We've had a succession of different speakers and, interestingly, kind of a pattern of university leaders. We had Stephen Levine from California Institute of the Arts speak here, and of course we're very honored this evening to have Shirley Tilghman from Princeton. So we also have another event, not necessarily related to that, but an important one, which is that our founding head of school, Jim Buckheit, who's been with us for 7 or 8 years, it depends on how you want to start the clock, is retiring in June. And to commemorate, to recognize Jim's founding efforts, we would like to rename these forums to, and let me get the exact wording right, the Buckheit Forum on Higher Education, which will carry us forward. And so, Jim, in your honor, I'd just like to give you a round of applause. Thank you. Jim was worried when I told him about this. He was actually very appreciative because it's nice to be recognized, but also I think he cares about the subject deeply. But he said, if you put this Buckheit name on it, people will say, well, what's that about? Why do I care? But we'll get to tell them, and that's why it matters to have the Buckheit name. So thank you for letting us honor you in this way. We're also planning to do events for Jim in June. So you'll be hearing more about it, those of you in the community that want to join us. So it'll be very meaningful and exciting and fun. So we look forward to that in the sense of celebrating, and we're less happy that you're moving on. Why are we here tonight? We're here tonight to learn more about what Princeton University is doing and to hear from President Shirley Tilghman. And there are a lot of links between Vistamar and Princeton. Most of them you won't know because they were right there at the formation stages of the school. But in the early days of mapping out what we wanted to do with Vistamar, one of the schools that we used as a template was Princeton University. And in fact, we pulled off Princeton's global vision as one of the documents we used in the early stages of talking about global education and what that really meant and what we were going to do with it. I think, and this again was 9 years ago, I think independently, both schools, starting with a similar global vision, also realized that there are different ways to do it. There's the element of global education that involves travel abroad and foreign students coming into your school and languages and being exposed to the global experience. But I think we also both realize that true global work is done because you are comfortable with other cultures. That in fact the diversity of Los Angeles, the diversity of our communities, is something that we absolutely need to embrace and celebrate, and is integrally part of the diversity of the global experience. I think some people see them as separate tracks. I think both our schools see them as inseparable. So with that, Shirley, if I can introduce you finally. We're very honored to have President Tilghman join us this evening. She came to Princeton in 1986, a few years after I graduated, so I didn't get to know her as a professor. And in 2001, she was named Princeton's 19th president. In her 9 years as president there, she has built on the strengths of the school, as well as preparing it for an important future. She's built the residential college system, more meaningful, or, well, you're not going to know the residential college system, but that one actually is meaningful to me, but less so to non-Princetonians. But more importantly, in terms of the Vistamar vision, she's been involved in a new approach to teaching science and engineering in a very integrated and collaborative way, which we relate to very much here at Vistamar. She's built a new neuroscience institute. There's been increased multidisciplinary collaboration, and she's been the champion for a groundbreaking policy on financial aid, which is something that really is an effort that we have also tried to model here at Vistamar, and has as its goal diversity. Obviously, there are many things she has done outside of Princeton that has had a national impact, and she has received numerous honors and awards, which I won't go through tonight. So we are fortunate to have President Shirley Tilghman join us. Please help me welcome her to our forum.
Good evening, everyone. Okay, we're going to try that one more time. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. All right. Now we know we're off to the races. I want to thank Rob for that very kind welcome, and to Jim for opening his school to me this evening. It's such a pleasure to visit Vistamar and to observe the really exciting educational experiment that is unfolding on this campus. The quest, as one of Vistamar's founders put it, for the perfect high school experience. Now, perfection is something that no institution, certainly including Princeton, and we've been trying for 265 years, has managed to attain. But thanks to the dedication of a remarkable group of young men and women, including Princeton alumni Rob and Alicia Lovelace, who are here, Vistamar has blossomed into something that is really special, an American school with a global sensibility and a profound commitment to the value of diversity. With a student body that is roughly half female and half non-white, and in which more than 40% of students receive some form of financial aid, Vistamar reflects America in the way that many schools do not. In a nation where municipal boundaries or the mobility conferred by wealth have divided student populations on socioeconomic and all too frequently racial lines, it is no small distinction for a day school to attract a student body from more than 70 feeder schools representing more than 50 zip codes. As one student put it, by attending a school like Vistamar that is intentionally diverse and inclusive, I have been encouraged to find and celebrate diversity in my own life, something this young woman had not encountered in her own neighborhood. Now tonight I realize that I am probably preaching to the choir. You would not be here if this were not something that you cared about. But that's never stopped me in the past. So I am going to try and explore with you this evening questions that many Americans, comfortably ensconced in neighborhoods like that student's, are prone to ask, why should we care if our schools and universities are diverse communities? After all, should not our only real concern be the talent of the faculty and the aptitude of their students? For some of our fellow citizens, anything else is at best peripheral, of a peripheral importance. And some would even go so far to say, darn right un-American. They would claim that the pursuit of educational diversity is a form of social engineering that uses discriminatory practices to redress past wrongs, subverting the principle of a colorblind meritocracy. This is a popular and very seductive argument, but one, in my view, that is fatally flawed in the context of 21st century America. Let me begin, however, with the first of these contentions, that diversifying our classrooms should be a low priority relative to other laudable educational goals, be it greater student achievement or more effective teachers. The problem with this point of view is that it misses the point. Diversity in this telling is perceived as an end in and of itself, diversity for diversity's sake, rather than as a means to an end, namely achieving the very excellence that many would say outweighs diversity as an educational priority. Far from being unimportant or incidental, a diverse student body and faculty significantly enhances the educational experience of all students, opening the way to fuller lives and a more robust society. This is precisely the conclusion reached by Associate Justice Sandra Day O'Connor and four of her fellow justices of the U.S. Supreme Court in their landmark 2003 decision in Grutter versus Bollinger. In this case, a young woman named Barbara Grutter challenged the decision of the University of Michigan Law School that denied her admission, and she thought on the grounds that she was overlooked in favor of less academically qualified applicants because of her race, which was white. In writing for the 5-4 majority of the court, O'Connor argued that diversity is a legitimate and compelling interest in education precisely because educational benefits flow from a diverse student body. Now, what are the nature of those benefits? The first one is that many studies have now clearly shown that students simply learn more in an environment where preconceived notions, born of circumstance and upbringing, are being continually challenged by fellow students who come from a different environment. Classroom discussion is livelier, more spirited, and simply more enlightening and interesting when students have the greatest possible variety of backgrounds. One of my favorite examples of this effect was told to me by Gary Bass, a professor of politics at Princeton. For years now, he has been teaching a course on human rights and war crimes tribunals. But several years ago, he had a student from Bosnia in his class. That year, the quality of the discussion was profoundly raised by the presence of this student, whose family had lived through the Bosnian War and could recount firsthand knowledge of what it meant to live with the specter of genocide. For those students in that class that year, what could have been an abstract set of discussions about human rights became vivid reality. Furthermore, the presence of students from different backgrounds can affect the nature of the material being taught. If, for example, the subject is history, the interests and the perceptions of someone in the South Bay whose forebears suffered under the Chinese Exclusion Act or the Japanese-American internment will differ from those of a white Californian whose family's claim to citizenship has never been questioned. By bringing students and teachers of Asian and European heritage together, the temptation to focus on one historical storyline at the expense of another is very much diminished. The best education is first and foremost one that transmits knowledge and understanding while opening the mind to other points of view, that prompts a critical reassessment of long-held views. But it also provides a second benefit that Justice O'Connor highlighted in her decision. It fosters empathy toward the other, an appreciation of those least like oneself, rooted in a respect for difference and a recognition of commonalities. This can only happen fully in a diverse environment, when black sits down to lunch with white, when straight and gay rub shoulders on the same athletic team, when Christian, Muslim, Jew, and atheist probe each other's views in a class on the nature of religious thought, and when the privileged and the disadvantaged find themselves as roommates and learn to see the world through each other's eyes. One of the images that I used to show when I gave lectures about the Human Genome Project, Rob, in his excellent introduction, forgot to say I'm a geneticist, which is why I give lectures on the Human Genome Project, was a photograph of Wilt Chamberlain, one of the greatest basketball players of all time, and a towering 7 feet tall, and Willie Shoemaker, the most successful jockey of his day, in part because of his very short stature. Now, the photograph was taken by American Express as part of a big ad campaign, and the point of the photograph was to catch your attention as you were flipping through your magazine looking for the next article that you wanted to read. And obviously what they were hoping is that the differences between Wilt and Willie, were going to take you aback. And if I could show you that picture right now, I think you would agree that the differences between Wilt and Willie that were emphasized in this picture were stark in terms of height, weight, skin color, eye color, hair texture, on and on and on. The question I always ask my audiences was the following: what strikes you most? The differences between Wilt and Willie, which were there to behold, or their remarkable similarities in terms of gender, body plan, number of ears, eyes, nose, physiology, metabolism, etc., etc., etc. My purpose, of course, was to get to my punchline, which was that Wilt and Willie are 99.99% identical at the level of DNA. Now, that picture has always served for me as a visual metaphor of the glory of human diversity and how it makes our lives richer and much more interesting. How boring if everyone were 5'7" and could neither dunk a basket nor stay on a horse. But human diversity cannot be understood or capitalized upon if one cannot, as Princeton professor Cornel West says, imagine yourself in someone else's skin. Or, in the words of President Gerald Ford, a man not often quoted in the same paragraph as Cornel West. I realized that as I was writing this. Tolerance, breadth of mind, and appreciation for the world beyond our neighborhoods. These can be learned on the football field and in the science lab, as well as in the lecture hall, but only if students are exposed to America in all her glorious variety. And I need not tell this particular audience that America has never been so varied. Indeed, we're poised to become a nation of minorities in which no one group can justifiably claim preeminence. A few statistics from the U.S. Census Bureau tells the tale. In 2008, non-Caucasians represented 47% of children under 5 and 44% of those younger than 18, with Hispanics leading the way. This is the future, and one that is approaching rapidly. Demographers predict that white America will lose its numerical superiority by 2042, a sea change that has already occurred here in California, as well as in New Mexico and Texas, to say nothing of Hawaii, which has never had a white majority. All of this has profound social implications, and it demands an educational response that will prepare the rising generation of Americans for a new reality. The glue that will hold tomorrow's America together is empathy, a capacity to identify with the concerns and the aspirations of others. And empathy can only be acquired through shared experience, especially in the formative years of childhood and adolescence. It is much harder to dismiss or belittle one segment of the population when they bear the face of a friend or a classmate, or to silently endure, let alone accept, the dichotomies of us and them that fill the airwaves and the blogosphere. Sadly, empathy is harder to achieve than one might think, for segregation did not expire with the passage of the Civil Rights Act. Whether self-imposed or sustained by socioeconomic inequalities, many Americans are being raised today in isolation from the other. According to a disturbing report by the Pew Hispanic Center, in the academic year 2005-06, 56% of Hispanic students in the United States were being educated in majority Latino public schools, where just 3% of the population were white. In the same vein, half of African American students were attending majority black public schools, attended by 2% white students. In my native Canada, that was another thing that Rob forgot to mention in his introduction. I don't mean to be sensitive here, but in my native Canada, the French and English communities are sometimes described as two solitudes. But in the United States, there are not two solitudes, there are many solitudes, which can only be bridged in a substantive way when schools and universities pursue diversity with the same vigor as other measures of academic success. But I could imagine the cynics among us saying that while empathy may be morally admirable and nice to encourage, it is hardly sufficient reason for the state to intervene in decisions that affect how schools, colleges, and universities go about selecting and educating their students. And that brings me to the third conclusion that Justice O'Connor highlighted in her extraordinary decision. She wrote, "In order to cultivate a set of leaders with legitimacy in the eyes of the citizenry, it is necessary that the path to leadership be visibly open to talents and qualified individuals of every race and ethnicity. All members of our heterogeneous society must have confidence in the openness and integrity of the educational institutions providing this training." In other words, not that I would dare suggest I could improve upon Justice O'Connor's words, in a country that has an ever-widening gap between the haves and the have-nots, between the reasonably secure and the perpetually insecure, between limitless personal prospects and inescapable dead ends, schools like Vistamar and universities like Princeton are serving a public good by acting as agents of social mobility. Quite apart from the empathy they foster and the high-quality learning they impart, they are the surest means we have of giving substance to the egalitarian principles on which America was founded. Indeed, founding fathers such as Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, Princeton class of 1771, I had to get one thing in, perceived a vital connection between popular education and democratic government. In Madison's words, learned institutions ought to be favorite objects with every free people. I love that phrase. They throw that light over the public mind, which is the best security against crafty and dangerous encroachments on the public liberty. Many years later, the civil rights movement eloquently made the case that equality before the law is inextricably linked with equal access to the advantages of education. In other words, the pursuit of educational diversity is also the pursuit of equal opportunity. And it was not just law schools that weighed in with the court on the societal advantages of diversity in education. Joining the University of Michigan were employers as different as General Motors and the U.S. Armed Forces. They made compelling cases that the skills needed in today's increasingly global marketplace can only be developed through exposure to widely diverse people, cultures, ideas, and viewpoints, as the 3M Company brief argued. The U.S. military argued that based on their decades of experience, a highly qualified, racially diverse officer corps is essential to the military's ability to fulfill its principal mission to provide national security. This was a lesson the military learned the hard way in Vietnam, where a largely white officer corps found itself unsuccessfully trying to lead a largely minority cadre of servicemen. It simply didn't work. This brings me to the charge that advocates of educational diversity are once again confronting. The charge, in essence, that diversity is being achieved by reverse discrimination. There are many reasons why this claim is flawed, beginning with the implicit parallel it draws between exclusionary practices like those adopted in the segregated South and inclusionary efforts to broaden the range of students and faculty in any given school or university. There is also a widespread assumption that the beneficiaries of affirmative action are in some way getting a free ride, that their abilities do not count for their admission. This is deeply offensive and hurtful to students of color who live under a stereotyped threat that any success they enjoy has not been earned. What is forgotten in this debate is that admission decisions are as much about the future as they are about the past. When aspiring Princetonians ask our admission officers what they must do to prepare themselves for college, the first advice they receive is to take full advantage of their opportunities, both inside and outside the classroom, for that is as revealing as to motivation and more predictive of success than standardized test scores or grade point averages. I believe this fact is especially important in the context of creating diverse schools and universities, for it undercuts the argument that affirmative action, even when judiciously and narrowly employed, is the enemy of merit. In my view, it's just the opposite. Nor do the benefits of diversity end at the water's edge. The world is growing smaller and more competitive by the year. And unless we develop the talents of all our citizens, we will be engaging other nations with one arm tied behind our backs. And as our nation's traditional white leadership becomes an increasingly smaller proportion of the overall population, this weakness will only be exacerbated. The pursuit of diversity is very much the pursuit of national strength, not only by unleashing the capacities of greater numbers of Americans, but also by giving these Americans the cultural sensitivity and cosmopolitan knowledge they will need to thrive in a globalized environment where India can sometimes feel closer than Indiana. And so, from a variety of angles, be it educational enrichment, equality of opportunity, social cohesion, or national self-interest, diversity does matter. And the more diverse our student bodies and our faculties, the better it will be for us as individuals and as a people, one nation, indivisible. Thank you very much for inviting me today to share my thoughts with you.